You make of Keir Starmer's attacks on freedom of speech?
It's exactly what you'd expect from someone who holds his position. It's nothing new. I think in the UK, things have gone farther in the UK on the, what would you say, with regards to threats to freedom of expression than maybe anywhere in the West, although Canada's doing its best to play catch-up, maybe New Zealand. It's in keeping with his ethos. It's not surprising, and it's appalling.
Keir Starmer seemed to believe he was walking into a calm, respectful debate. Instead, he was confronted with sharp, direct arguments delivered with logic, energy, and precise language. Almost immediately, Starmer looked unprepared and uncertain, struggling to clearly explain his own ideas, particularly when it came to socialism. This was not a balanced political exchange. It felt more like a serious lecture combined with a public confrontation, with Starmer firmly on the back foot. Any viewer could see what happens when a well-read thinker challenges a politician who lacks solid intellectual grounding. Back in the slow, confusing world of Downing Street, Starmer is attempting to run a country with little presence and weak conviction. Jordan Peterson was not physically present, but his ideas landed with real force. They methodically exposed the shaky foundations of Starmer's leadership, revealing it to be unclear, fragile, and ultimately self-defeating.
Does it surprise you that Keir Starmer doesn't want a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
No, that doesn't surprise me. It's exactly what you'd expect. I've got an article coming out in the Telegraph this week about exactly that issue, and so it's appalling. While there's hard questions that need to be asked about and answered about multiculturalism, and no one's willing to have the discussion, but it needs to be had, obviously. And I think there's maybe a way forward with regards to the signatories of the Abraham Accord, to have a serious discussion about how Islamic fundamentalism might be brought under control and some vision of how.
Now picture Britain as a nation without clear direction. People feel anxious, institutions appear unstable, and leadership looks uncertain. At the centre of it all stands Starmer, relying on safe instructions and vague guidance, trying to move forward without upsetting anyone. He seems more concerned with avoiding criticism than with setting a firm course grounded in order and responsibility. Against this backdrop, Peterson's voice cuts through the confusion, raising a serious question. Does anyone in charge truly understand where the country is meant to be heading?
About the state of morality in Britain, that grooming gangs were taking place for more than 3 decades.
No, that's what happens when a naive, demented, and self-righteous multiculturalism takes the upper hand, and when the upper class is willing to sacrifice the poor to their own moral presumptions. Yeah, it's appalling in every possible way. And it indicates, it's indicative of something truly hideous beneath the surface, not only on the rape gang side, but obviously on the side of the authorities that conspired to keep it a secret. Dreadful.
Starmer's struggle with identity is not temporary, it defines his leadership. One moment he presents himself as a strong, progressive voice, and the next he drifts towards the political centre in an attempt to appear more acceptable. His position shifts so frequently that it becomes hard to know what he genuinely stands for. This is not flexibility or growth. It is confusion, and it leaves voters uncertain about what they are actually being asked to support.
Prediction for the UK election. You've been quite scathing about Sir Keir Starmer, but the polls show at the moment, certainly, if the election happens in the autumn, it seems likely, that he is heading to some kind of victory. What do you think that would mean for Britain? And do the Conservatives have any chance of stopping that?
I think it'll be catastrophic. I believe that Labour, like the socialist parties in Canada, is absolutely overwhelmed by the diversity, equity, and inclusivity, victimizer narrative types.
Peterson, known for explaining human behaviour through clear principles and his 12 rules, would see Starmer's constant shifting as a refusal to take responsibility. Starmer lacks clarity, and without clarity, leadership fails. His policies often feel vague, changing depending on who is listening. On economic issues, he presents plans that read more like corporate briefing papers. than a bold national vision. He promises growth, but offers no convincing strategy to deliver it. The burden continues to fall on the middle class, while the wealthiest face little real pressure. These measures feel cosmetic rather than meaningful. Peterson's emphasis on competence and structure exposes Starmer's preference for surface-level order. He governs cautiously, prioritizing process over purpose. There is little energy, conviction, or long-term ambition. Under his leadership, the economy feels stuck, leaning on recycled slogans and outdated ideas instead of real solutions.
Hypothetical utopian progress that it's almost unimaginable. I mean, the CCTVs in the ULEZ zones are a great example of that, and everything that's happened in London under Sadiq Khan, who's like poster boy for ideologically addled globalist utopians. And if the Labour gets in, and I can understand why the citizens of the UK are hungry for a change, if Labour gets in, it's like Venezuela, here we come.
On cultural issues, Starmer is so cautious about offending anyone that his party often ends up taking no clear position at all. As a result, Labour sounds hollow and uninspiring. He sidesteps difficult topics rather than confronting them directly. While this may reduce short-term controversy, it also drains public engagement and interest. Peterson argues for moral clarity and firm principles, yet Starmer appears to believe that silence will protect him, even as his party's values become increasingly difficult to identify. He seems to hope that avoiding reality will also avoid accountability. At the same time, Starmer has adopted a far more controlling style within his own party. Once praised as a defender of internal democracy, he now runs Labour with a tight grip. Candidate selection offers little genuine grassroots involvement, resembling a stage-managed process rather than a democratic one. Any dissent is quickly suppressed, and voices from the left have been quietly pushed aside as if they never existed at all.
And Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse. It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressivism. So, and that's really the fundamental aim. It's like, how can we show we're right? And if we have to burn some young people on the pyre to make sure that our moral presuppositions can remain intact and our faith in our idiocy remains unchallenged, then we might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on adolescence.
Now compare this with Jordan Peterson's respect for strong institutions and shared responsibility. Starmer is not building a movement, he is managing a product. It feels like a dull corporate brand, focused on rules, checklists, and presentations rather than ideas or inspiration. For him, leadership seems to be about tight control, not direction or belief. He manages people, monitors them, and inspects outcomes, but rarely inspires confidence or purpose. In foreign policy, Starmer seldom sets the tone. Instead, he follows the lead of others. International meetings become formal appearances where he repeats positions already shaped by larger Western powers. His global approach is driven by image rather than principle. Statements are carefully released, while strategy is reduced to public messaging. Britain under Starmer is not being led with purpose, it is being overseen by someone acting like a middle manager who believes competence alone is enough. Peterson, who emphasises personal responsibility and meaningful action, would likely see Starmer as an example of ambition without guiding principles. He appears weak, constantly seeking approval rather than standing firm, even on issues that should be straightforward, such as housing, education, and climate policy. Housing plans vanish into endless planning discussions. Education reform is buried under targets and performance measures. Climate policy is written so cautiously that it avoids upsetting major donors or everyday voters. Every decision is filtered through risk calculations instead of being driven by clear goals.
Actual desire to tar anyone who has, as I say, not got a voice and is wanting to make their voice heard as a violent far-right neo-Nazi seems to me to be a big error by Keir Starmer and others. Because, if you can't say, we recognize your deep concerns about some things that have happened, including mass stabbings, terrorism, and much more. We understand your deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this. But there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbours or anything.
Starmer has reduced governing to a bland, cautious exercise. There is no strength, no passion, only carefully crafted talking points that sound safe but ultimately mean very little. Britain does not need a senior manager. It needs a leader with resolve, a clear plan and a genuine presence. Peterson did more than challenge Starmer intellectually. He revealed that behind the polished appearance and rehearsed responses, there is very little substance. The timing makes this all the more serious. Britain faces major problems on every front. The health service is under immense strain. The housing market is out of reach for many, behaving more like a game than a system designed for people. Young generations are growing up with uncertainty and constant stress over their futures. Through it all, Starmer delivers statements that feel flat and ineffective. Peterson wouldn't need to raise his voice because Starmer undermines himself. He comes across like a political self-help book, full of vague advice, avoiding specifics and offering no real solutions. Britain deserves more than comforting words. It needs leadership that drives progress, rather than merely slowing decline. What Peterson analyses in theory is exactly what the country experiences in reality. Leadership reduced to slogans tested by focus groups, belief replaced by tidy administration. Starmer represents what happens when a nation in crisis opts for a risk advisor instead of a prime minister.
Somehow navigate us to a better place. Possibly, is he going to be a transformative prime minister where we all wake up in 2-3 years and think, wow, the Starmer revolution? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's better. That's better than it might have been. Well, I spent quite a long time working with Democrats in the U.S. and I got very disillusioned about that, partly because they showed zero propensity to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and the radical.
And with that, Peterson's arguments cut straight to the heart of number 10, delivering uncomfortable clarity without raising his voice or creating drama. He methodically examines Starmer's leadership, step by step, exposing its weaknesses through reason alone. Starmer holds high office and impressive titles, yet he lacks firmness and direction. Peterson didn't need aggression, he simply reflected reality back. At the core of Peterson's thinking is a simple principle: leaders should take responsibility for their actions. Starmer, by contrast, treats responsibility as something to avoid. When problems arise, whether strikes, NH delays or economic troubles, he retreats behind investigations, reviews, and vague promises to learn lessons. Peterson's message is clear: get your own house in order before trying to run a country. Starmer's approach is different. He treats governing like a group assignment, hoping someone else takes the blame when things go wrong. Then there is the issue of vision. Leaders are expected to provide direction, purpose, and a clear plan for the future. Yet Starmer leads a major political party and governs the UK with the energy and imagination of an instruction manual, leaving people uncertain about where the country is actually heading.
I suspect what will happen in the UK is the same thing that happened in Canada, which is that the right will split, reform, and reunite, and that would be the best bet. Maybe as a coalition government, I'm not staking my, what would you say? Not on either candidate. I've spoken with Nigel Farage and with Kemi Badenoch, and they're both credible people, and they have to fight it out amongst themselves. But I imagine the right will unite eventually again and hopefully reform.
While Jordan Peterson emphasises structure, order, and clear moral principles, Starmer seems to believe that upbeat language and management buzzwords can substitute for a genuine political philosophy. Peterson uses strong, coherent ideas to make sense of chaos and responsibility, whereas Starmer avoids direct answers on issues like rail strikes, treating them as if they were somehow dangerous. Whether people agree with Peterson or not, he does more than merely critique ideas, he connects them into a consistent system. His message is simple: put your own life in order before attempting to lead others. Now consider Starmer's record. It is not just disorganised, it is fundamentally unsound. Many of his policies feel incomplete or abandoned. His positions often contradict each other, and decisions seem shaped more by polling than principle. Where Peterson builds his arguments on a solid, deliberate foundation, Starmer's leadership feels rushed and unstable, held together by caution rather than conviction. Starmer is not just ineffective, he embodies the opposite of leadership. He comes across as a polished administrator, trained to manage appearances rather than inspire confidence. There is no visible passion or strong sense of identity. He communicates through carefully written statements, campaigns with vague promises, and governs as if constantly anxious about public ratings. Peterson would likely describe this as moral weakness, a refusal to take a clear stand in cultural and political debates out of fear of upsetting the media, donors, or influential institutions.